Hello, sisters. Wait. The audio sounds weird. Hey, I think the audio is better now. Well, let's hope. All right. Hello, one viewer. So before we get into it, I guess like a little bit of housekeeping. I haven't streamed since I think May. Uh, hey Allie, it's really good to see you. Um, I think I haven't streamed since May. Usually my intention is to like have hiatuses, but like not that long. So my intention was to finish out my crazy workload in June, stream a few times at the beginning of July, and then go to Women's Land, which is obviously offline, and then come back in September and stream again. Hey Izzy. Uh my crazy workload in June was insane, and I did not have time to stream at all in June. At the beginning of July, I was just like trying to get women ready to go to the Women's Land. Um like working more to save up money, like organizing my camping gear, like organizing logistics, things like that. So at the end of the day, I just didn't get and I felt the other thing that happened was I kept in my mind being like, you just need to do this one stream. I went the first weekend of June to the International Congress to Abolish Prostitution, which happened in Montreal. I think last time it was like in Germany, and the time before that was like in France. So I was excited to happen in Canada. Like I could drive there. Um, and thank you to all the women who let me like sleep on the floor of their hotel rooms for free in Montreal. A plus. So I got books signed. I bought books. Like I got like pamphlets. Like attended. I live tweeted like the whole thing in English because a lot of it was like in French and Spanish. So I was trying to like make it accessible in English online and stuff. So I was like, the next live stream I'm gonna do is gonna be like a recap of like the Congress. Um, and then like life got crazy and I didn't do that. So I have like all the pamphlets and books and stuff like in a bag. And I'm like, this is like for the live stream. And like, I'm moving soon. Like, is a live stream going to happen? I don't think so. Anyway, but what I can say is that the next Congress to abolish prostitution, I don't know where it's going to be. I don't think they announced it yet, but I'm fucking going. Even if it's in like Spain or something, I'm going. It was so amazing to hear all these panels of women talking about their experiences, their advocacy work, their activism, like what they do to change policy, what they do to like do frontline work helping women leaving prostitution and sex trafficking. It was like honestly life-changing. As like a radical feminist, I feel like I had no idea what the fuck I was talking about before I went to this Congress. It was like so awe-inspiring. Anyway, that happened in June. Went to Women's Land, came back, and I was like, you're gonna get back on the YouTubes. And then, as you can assume, like I have two jobs and I'm like fucking tired all the time. So like I didn't get back on the YouTubes. I'm moving over Christmas break, basically, like over the holidays, and then I'll have my own place. And once I have my own place, I'll only have one job. In theory, I will stream more because I'll have one job. I will like schedule. Jesus Christ, this is so fucking loud. I will schedule streaming on all the days that I don't work or something. So I'm really looking forward to that because I also have like a pile of books that I want to make into amateur audiobooks. And I keep being like, this book is only like 10 chapters. Like, you just need to. And it's like, when? So, January. I'm going to try to be really on it. Yeah, Ali, it was a really like life-changing experience. Like, I cried a couple times. I mean, obviously, like, and also, I didn't really like take time off work. I took like 2 days off work for like this 3-day thing. And like, on the last day, like, there was like stuff going on like a Monday or a Sunday or whatever. And I like immediately drove home, went to work. And like, in my mind, I didn't like anticipate, which is so stupid, that it would be such an emotionally like overwhelming experience to hear these women talking about, you know, their like how their life has been destroyed by sex trafficking and prostitution. Um and so like the emotional like recovery period was a lot longer than I thought it would be. I didn't take time off work for that. Like I should have. Next time I do something like that, I will take time off work. Yeah, anyway. Um, yeah, so TLDR. sorry I haven't been around. I have like thoughts about being around and like plans to be around, and then I don't have time. So in January, I'm making time. All right. So today I only have my evening job. So I was like running around doing errands this morning, you know, getting groceries and stuff, doing laundry. And I saw this article a few days ago, like linked in the description as usual. I saw this article a few days ago. And some of my friends were texting me and being like, wow, this article is so great. Like this paragraph or this sentence like speaks to my experience, or like I know what this woman's talking about. And I was like, oh, okay, like interesting. I kind of forgot about the WDI USA Women Lesbian Caucus or whatever it's called. Like I know they did like the Lesbian Bill of Rights. I think I know one of the women who worked on it. Maybe not. If you're here, like hi. And yeah, I kind of forgot about them. My friends were like, this article is pretty good. I didn't read it. Today I saw some women being critical of it on Twitter, and I thought, like, you know, I want to push back a little bit and say, like, I understand why you're critical of this article, but I understand why some women feel seen by what the article is talking about. It's really great to see you, Ali. Have a good meeting. And basically, in like less than 10 tweets, I was like, Twitter is not the place. Butch-femme is a very, not sure which word to use, like, sensitive topic, I guess, when you're coming at it from either a feminist perspective or just an outright lesbian perspective, like as if those are two separate perspectives, you know what I mean? And as we all know, Twitter is not really the place for nuance. So I thought, you know, I haven't used this mic in so long. I feel like the mic is doing something weird, but it's not. I thought let's go on YouTube instead to give a long form response. Not to those women in particular, because what they had to say I wasn't really surprised by, and not to my friends who texted me in particular, because again, what they had to say wasn't really surprising to me. But I want to like give some of my general thoughts on like butch-femme. Read the article. It's like a blog post. It's very short. And then give my response to the article, blog post, whatever. Oh, interesting, Paula. Paula says there's an article/interview where Audre Lorde has criticisms of butch-femme. I read it online years ago, but haven't been able to find it again. Right, well, that makes sense, because I feel like this discourse, I guess, hit its zenith in like the 80s and kind of has been like petering off as less and less important and less talked about since then. So another reason why I wasn't really surprised when I read this was it's not like a new discourse. It's just a lot less common that it's talked about. So if you've heard about it once, you've talked about your friends with it once, like it's kind of the same. There hasn't really been any like new progress on it, which is kind of why I wanted to make a live stream about it, because I think I have a little bit of new stuff to add to it. Yeah, anyway, okay, so I have on Twitter, I've basically only seen negative responses to this blog post. And I understand why that is. But like before we get into it, I want to give kind of like a list of the things that I think are like the basis for disagreeing about this. Because I actually think most women who fall on either side of like I don't really think there's actually sides of this, actually are probably all saying the same thing. Or all probably feel the same way, even if they're not using the same words to say it. So like the first thing is, oh my god, I had such a well-constructed argument before I opened the camera. I need to get used to like live streaming again. Like first of all, what does butch and femme mean? Because a lot of women, they don't really bother to define it, and they're just like, I'll know it when I see it. And other women are like, no, they're like strict fucking characteristics. And if you don't fall into it, like don't fucking call yourself that, blah, 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 blah. That speaks to me in particular because I have been told by many women that I'm butch. I used to call myself butch for a bit. Then I feel like I don't know how to term it. Like I wouldn't say I outgrew the word exactly, but I kind of like outgrew that word being necessary for me, if that makes sense. Where I was like, I don't need this word as a descriptor for myself. And so the first point I think that is like an issue with this discourse is like, are butch-femme descriptive or prescriptive? This is a very, very difficult thing to tackle right now because of the state of gender things. Gender things have become so prescriptive that I think it's almost impossible for, like, say, a 20-year-old lesbian right now to come across a term which is supposed to have like a relevancy to her culture as like a lesbian and not interpret it and enact it as if it is prescriptive rather than descriptive. Like, we're in such like a it's such a high pressure culture, but it's almost impossible not to do that, I think. So I think that's one of the issues. Like, butch femme, is it descriptive, prescriptive? What exactly do those words mean? That's like the first issue. I think the second issue is like nature nurture. And I came ready with like literature for this like discussion about nature nurture, because anybody who tells me like that's just the way I am or something, what does that mean? Like, it literally, you can't like give me a clear explanation of what that means. And so when in terms of like a discussion, it's basically like a conversation stopper. I don't like that. I want to talk through things with you, like, as someone, like, I respect, whoever you are, whether you are agreeing with me or disagreeing with me. I want to, like, the conversation to move forward. And if you just say like, well, nature, I'm like, what does it fucking mean? Like, it doesn't mean anything to me. Like, so on the nature nurture front, I have a couple things to say right off the bat before we like get moving. I'm like agnostic on it. I'm not a blank slatist, but I think that nothing is in a vacuum, so we can't know. So I kind of, in a way, would like to just sidestep the nature nurture argument and address it like obliquely or abstractly and not make it like the center of any conversation I have about butch femme. What, like, in the nature side, on the nurture side, as a radical feminist, I have so many thoughts about the like socialization and enforcement of gender that I don't really understand how you can talk about butch femme and be like, that's just the way it is, without, as if you live in a vacuum, when literally no woman lives in a vacuum. Like, that's like, if nature nurture is part of the argument, that's where my starting off point is, right? Yeah. So this is kind of like nature nurture point 2 / like the third point about why women get upset about this topic, like butch femme and like, gender roles and feminism and stuff, is like the experience of butchness. I'm using the term butch here because I think it's like intelligible to like you, the viewer. But I actually think it's like a bit of a limiting word because it's obviously like cultural, right? Like where you are. Like, I know like in the Balkans or something, or like in like Asia, they would have like a different word that means like a girl who is a tomboy, or a girl who, no matter what, can't really conform to femininity. Like, the experience of a girl who is socialized into like girlhood or womanhood or femininity and like just can't click no matter how hard she tries is obviously like a distinct experience that's worth discussing, and is the lived experience of a lot of women. I'm not trying to say like it doesn't matter, it definitely is a real thing that exists, and it definitely has a really deep impact on you, the woman who has that experience, right? But my issue in general is that instead of saying this is an experience that this subgroup of women has that is unique and impactful to them, therefore it's worth, like, understanding and talking about and creating space to support them, all these things, instead of saying just that, it's taken a step further a lot of times in a way that I find to be like very unproductive, even destructive, where it's like, and therefore no other woman knows what it's like and can't speak to this and shouldn't criticize that group of women. I've said this before in many, many of my streams. Longtime viewers know there is no group of women that I think is above criticism, questioning, right? And because I respect you, I will criticize and question you. You're not some fucking baby that if I ask you one question, you're going to fall over and like expire. Like, I don't understand this idea that like whichever group of women at this time in whichever discussion is like under so much pressure that if anybody asks her questions, they basically want her dead. Like, this is giving genderist, where like words are attacks or words are violence. Like, no, it's not. It's not. And if if a woman takes it that I'm asking questions and expressing like an analysis or a critique as like I'm attacking her, honestly, that's a kind of a you problem that you can't have a discussion without taking it personally. Um, and that kind of leads me back to like the very first thing I said before I gave my like 3 point list, which is a lot of women look at me and tell me I'm butch. So I kind of feel, in a sense, that this conversation is a bit about me because I'm supposed to like fit into these weird boxes, which again, then this is becoming descriptive, not sorry, prescriptive, not descriptive, right? And I think about this a lot. Like a big part of my YouTube trajectory was like getting away from men because of what example am I setting? And when I think about this discussion, I'm like, what example am I setting? I don't think that if a woman thinks like I'm butch, that it's good for her to never ask questions about like what does that mean for the women around me? What does that mean within the culture, whichever lesbian culture you're in, like depending on where you are geographically or on the internet? What does it mean for me and my culture? What does it mean for the women around me? What does it mean for like the history of lesbians, like from where they started to where we got now? Like I don't understand why it's like don't ask any questions. Why? Why? I think it's like really, really healthy to ask questions and like gain a deeper understanding of things, especially if it's something that's like impacting you and the one around you in your day-to-day life. Like, how is it possible that butchness is such a unique struggle that it's unquestionable, and yet it's such a unique struggle that we shouldn't talk about it, like, except in a positive way? Like, that makes no sense to me. Anyway, okay. So I guess that's like, wait, one of my friends is like watching this, texting me. My friend is like, this stream has like concepts of a plan. Yeah, dude, I haven't streamed in forever. Okay. Let's like get into the because I have some stuff already that I know I'm gonna say, but I wanted to say it like in response to the article, like as it comes. What's she saying now? I love you. Okay, well, I love you too. Okay. Let's do the thing. Here we go. As always, you can follow along now at home or like later at home or whatever. It's in the description. And always archives in the description too, in case whatever it is ends up getting taken down. All right. So this came out just a few days ago. As always on the channel, I actually haven't read it. Friends of mine have sent like clips of it, like screen caps of it to me, and then their responses to it. So yeah. This article draws on the experiences of one member of the Lesbian Caucus. However, like all Lesbian Caucus articles, it was written and edited collaboratively. For many years, I was immersed in the cult of butch-femme. I not only participated in it, but also defended it. For purposes of this article, butch-femme means general conformity with the sex stereotypes of masculinity and femininity within lesbian communities. Okay, right off the bat, I disagree with the use of the term cult here. I think culture is the right word here. Obviously, the women who wrote this, whoever they are, have the right to use whatever language they want. I just, as someone who, if you watch my really early videos, know that I've done like quite a bit of research about cults. It's just like objectively not the right word in this context. But I think culture is the right word. Anyway, let's keep going. From around 1985 to 2005, in a medium-sized university town in the northeast of the US, I guess, my crowd felt that our version of butch-femme was different from the mere appearance of butch or femme that aligns with how each sex is expected to dress. For us, butch-femme was a dynamic that included expectations of accepted behaviors for both parties and were socially enforced by the butch-femme lesbian communities. How I ended up in that lesbian crowd was simple. It's where I found acceptance immediately after coming out as a lesbian. Okay, I understand, I think, where she's going to come from with this whole cult thing. At that time in my life, I felt that I had been born a femme lesbian. I thought it was simply who I was. Every day I went out into the world to my job, to parties, shopping, and errands in full femme regalia. Hair done every day with hot rollers, a choking amount of hairspray, Aquanet no less, perfume, full makeup, a full slip, skirt, hose, purse, and a scarf. The pumps I wore every day hurt my feet and damaged them permanently. The blouses were uncomfortable, and I was endlessly purchasing pantyhose that barely lasted 2 wearings. The hair appointments for cuts and colors, because nothing is more feminine than blonde hair, were expensive and time-consuming. In retrospect, the manicures, pedicures, and leg and Brazilian waxes all cut significantly into my tight budget and cost me time I could have better spent in other ways. If you watch my channel for a while, I mean, I'm like on the same page as her. Femininity as like a form of dress is harmful to women financially, physically, and I think kind of like in terms of ambition or emotion. It has like a very big impact on them in a negative way. So I'm on the same page as her with this. This is, she says it harmed her. She didn't like it. But it seemed there wasn't much that my butch partner enjoyed more than dropping her femme off at the nail salon and waiting for a call to pick her up. My ritualized helplessness and dependency on her for transportation to and from the place where my feminized appearance was purchased became disturbing to me over time. I felt as though I was being railroaded into playing a theatrical role in someone else's fiction, and that her fiction was her reason for living. Okay, we're gonna stop here for a second. Oh, Jesus, with the fucking camera. Like, can you focus one time? Not really. All right, well, we tried. Oh, it focused. Okay. The term ritualized helplessness to me kind of cuts through a lot of what this woman's trying to say very clearly. So, masculinity and femininity are synthetic, right? There's something that, as a culture, it's created and enforced and perpetuated. And if you didn't have someone around to tell you that liking pink was for girls, you wouldn't fucking know that, right? So, in a similar way, if you don't have someone around to say that like being the butch is the one who like drives the truck and like changes tires or whatever it is, you wouldn't know that's what it is, right? So this leads me to my nature nurture contention. This woman is saying that she found this all to be, I would describe what she's saying is that she's being alienated by the performance of femininity. Now, a lesbian who's a proponent of butch-femme would say, oh, but that's because for her, it was the wrong thing. For another woman, it would have been fine. And like, what does that mean? Because every single feminist book that I've ever read that talks about gender roles, I mean, like actual feminist books, you know, like radical feminist books, it talks about gender roles and femininity and all this kind of thing, at some point addresses the concept of women having like a kind of out-of-body experience almost, where there's like the subject-object issue, where the woman is like, I'm acting, so I'm a subject, but I'm acting upon myself as if I'm an object. Like I'm objectifying myself through the performance of femininity. And I'm doing that so that when I step out into the world, I'm seen as like a sex object or like as an object that's an accessory to the subject. So this whole thing of like my partner enjoyed dropping me off at the salon to get like feminized, it's like, yeah, because in like this butch femme dynamic, you have the woman who is butch, who is like, you know, I don't have to put all this like extra work into my appearance. I just do what comes naturally. And the woman next to me, she is like the adornment that makes me look the way I look because we have to contrast each other. And aside from the fact that there is no such thing as a woman who was born with the destiny to curl her hair and wear heels, because those are like cultural things that like that's not nature. I want to discuss like two things. The first thing is that a lot of butches would contend that, like, you know, I was born into femininity like everybody else and I couldn't fit in. Well, reading this, do you think this woman naturally fit into femininity? Even women who love femininity, like beauty influencers on like TikTok or whatever, they talk about how much work and effort it is to like maintain it. So I don't like the whole butch femme dynamic mentality because it does this like othering thing between women where it's like these women are fine with it and these women are not fine with it. How about the reality, which is that like these women find it unnatural and so they won't do it. These women find it unnatural but think they have to do it, or don't have self-worth if they don't do it, or they find it a struggle but they'll do it anyway because of XY. Like, it's just not true that there are some women who are just like naturally born to wear synthetic makeup that's like mined in like mines and like whatever, child labor and like shit. It makes no it's not true. That's not true. The other thing, what was I about to say? I don't know. I forgot the other thing I was about to say a second ago. Like, I have concepts of a plan. Like, yeah. It's been so long since I live streamed. When I used to do it like 2-3 times a week, I got really good at like making mental lists and like checking things off as I went. Well, I have a couple of readings. I'm not going to read them to you, but I have a couple of readings about gender, like femininity, masculinity. That they have like graphs in them. Is that the right word? Where it's like a little chart of like masculinity, femininity, and the traits inherent in both. Oh, that's the thing. Okay. That was the second thing. Ritualized helplessness. I like this term in this context, cuts through things very clearly. If one is helpless, then the other must be helpful, right? If one is ineffective, the other must be effective. If one is weak, one is strong. Blah, blah. They have to complement each other. They have to be inverses of each other. So a lot of butches say, I'm not trying to say that they're like liars and I hate them. Like, I actually think a lot of this stuff does apply to me, but it doesn't matter what I think about myself personally. What matters is like the analysis for women as a whole, and in this case, for lesbians as a whole. A lot of butches would say, my gosh, my brain. I'm sorry, guys. My experience with gender was harmful. Like, they tried to feminize me, and it didn't just like not stick. It hurt me, right? Oh, but these women, the ones who enjoy wearing heels and lipstick and getting their hair done, it doesn't hurt them. They enjoy it. And they do this weird thing where they're basically like, I don't engage with gender, so I'm not the problem. She does engage with gender, but because it's natural for her, it's not a problem. And I'm like, we don't live in like some weird bubble where only lesbians exist. We live in a society that genders women so clearly and intentionally and forcefully that you can't just say it's bad for straight women, but it's fine for me. Or it's bad for straight women, but it's fine for my girlfriend. It has no negative impacts on her because, like, one of the most common talking points in this discourse, like the butch-femme gender role discourse, is that, when women, like, feminize themselves and, like, objectify themselves, they're doing it to attract, like, for the male gaze. But when femmes do it for a butch, they're not doing it and I'm like, okay, for sure, whatever. It's giving choice feminism, where it's like, oh, I went to the strip club and stripped, but I didn't do it for like men. I did it to make money for myself. And it's like, who cares why you did it? At the end of the day, you did the exact same thing. So it's like, they're like, oh, well, when she puts on lingerie or heels or whatever, she's doing it because she wants a woman to find her attractive. So she's like, it's a little bit different. It's called a different way. It has a different intention, a different like tone, different vibe. And I'm like, I don't care. You're still wasting your money on beauty products. You're still spending time in front of the mirror, looking at yourself and thinking like, when I'm naked of makeup and accoutrement, something is wrong with me. You're still doing all the things that hurt women, except you're doing it to yourself and you're a lesbian. I don't understand how that's like, it doesn't hurt lesbians or something. Yes, it does. Like, I just don't understand it. Yeah, okay, so Nick's brought this thing up. Nick says, masculine and feminine aren't some sort of dyad or two opposing things, equal but different. It's more like the feminine revolves around the masculine like a planet to its sun. That is so succinct. Thank you, Nix. Now that brings up my like charts. So some of these charts are like a response to like classical philosophy, like Plato, Socrates, talking about like what is a woman. And some of these charts, they move a little bit like later into kind of like postmodernism and deconstructionism and stuff. So I'm gonna list like 4 things that fall on like the masculine side of the chart, and then like 4 things that fall on the feminine side of the chart, okay? On the masculine side, public, subject, self. On the feminine side, private, object, other. Exactly what you said. This is like Simone de Beauvoir, right? Where it's like one rotates around the other. Thanks. So, if the man is the actor with agency, then the woman is the dependent who is an accessory. Like necessarily, because if the man is one thing, then the woman can't become the other thing, right? So this is what I mean when people are like, oh, but like butch-femme, it's like just nature. And I'm like, how can you say it's just nature when we can observe the exact same behaviors and exact same mentalities and exact same like emotional dependence on the behaviors and mentalities among straight people, and then when lesbians do it, somehow it like doesn't count. I don't understand. I'm not trying to like villainize anyone or like attack anyone or make anybody feel guilty. I'm just saying, like, for years I have been asking. I know radical feminists who tell me like, Beaver, you just don't understand butch-femme. And they're like women I really respect who have like great analysis and like great like inquisitive instincts when it comes to like feminism and stuff. And they're like, you just haven't got it yet. I'm like, okay, I'm open to that idea. Then fucking explain it to me. What is it that I'm not getting? I also know lesbians who are radical feminists who are like, no, I'm on the same page as you. Like, it's become prescriptive. It's just another box for women. When you're enacting the same things you were like socially encoded to do, but saying it's for a different motivation, it doesn't stop it from having the same impact that it used to. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I have women on both sides in both ears telling me different things. I don't know what the fuck to think. This is what I think right now. Maybe I'll change my mind one day. But I'm like, you can't say, like, this woman, she's being objectified because she sees her partner as the subject. So she necessarily must be the object. How is that good for either of them? Like, at the same time, if you respect butch women, and I do, like, I respect all women, I expect better from you, man. Not to be like, well, I was born this way, so like, you can't expect anything better from me. Like, actually, I do fucking expect better from you, because you're like a fucking woman. Like, if a man does this shit, I don't expect better from him, but you're a woman, so I do expect better. Where it's like, I don't know. Part of what women will say when this discourse comes up is like, well, I don't like enforce anything onto my partner. And it's like, okay, for sure. Maybe in your situation that is 100% true. Maybe you never enforce, you never have expectations. But 2 things. One, there are tons of women who do enforce this stuff. Like, I have so many friends who are like, I tried to put on cargo pants, but then my girlfriend was like, you can't, because like I'm butch, and if you wear cargo pants and you stand next to me, like I won't look as butch, or some insane bullshit. So it's like, okay, maybe you don't enforce this, but that doesn't mean other women using the same vocabulary to describe what they think is the same culture that you're describing are not doing this toxic shit, right? And then the other thing is like, oh fuck, my brain today. Oh yeah, just because you're not enforcing it doesn't mean it's not taking place. So for example, like, there's like butch-femme communities online of women who are like over the age of 40, I'm guessing, who they'll talk about like, I'm looking for like I'm a femme looking for a butch, right? And they're like, well, to attract the right kind of butch, you know, you have to like do these things and like act this way and like dress this way, and like that's how you like find the butch for you. And I'm like, okay, imagine that the women who express these things get into a relationship with a butch lesbian. Do you think because the butch lesbian never like, when you're getting your nails done, your hair doesn't look the right way? Like, do you think because, or like, why are you wearing pants instead of a skirt? Do you think if the butch never says those things, that the femme never thinks those things and never acts on those things? Like, if you just think about women as a whole, right? We're conditioned to be like self-sacrificing, to be like self-modifying, to like be, like you said, a planet that revolves around a sun, to be like, what can I do to make the other person in the relationship happy? Like, what can I do to like maintain the positive thing we have, and to constantly be like self-modifying in an effort to like, you know, appease or whatever. So it's like you don't need to like be some kind of toxic, domineering, controlling partner for this dynamic to potentially be negative. No, I'm definitely coming off very much like I hate the butches, and that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is like, why can't you fucking ask questions? Like, what I imagine there's some butch femme couple at home watching me watching this video. Is it a bad thing for your relationship to hear me say these things? I don't think so. Like, you could still do whatever the fuck you want and just ask yourself, like, oh, you know, last time I did whatever this is, was it like for me because I want to do that? Or like for the sake of the dynamic or something? A lot of proponents of butch femme, again, they just contest, well, it's nature, it's natural. We just find each other and click together because like we each are like, the yin and the yang or whatever. That makes no sense to me. It's predicated on someone being naturally feminine. I don't think femininity is natural like that. Also butchness, it's like, where's the line between what's natural and not natural? Like, for example, I used to know a woman who like visually was very butch. A lot of her attitudes and behaviors were very, very butch. She didn't know how to use any power tools. She didn't have a license. None of these things because no one taught her. She never had the opportunity to learn how to do those things. A friend of mine and I were talking about butch femme a few days ago, and she was like, growing up, the only woman I ever knew who knew how to change a tire is the most feminine woman I've ever met in my life. Why? Because someone taught her how to change a tire. Like, this whole idea that butch femme is like nature, like, it's not nature, it's enculturated. And maybe naturally you're a woman that if you put on a skirt, you look super fucking awkward. I'm one of those women. Like, I like walk like a man or whatever when I put on a skirt. It looks really like unnatural. But I still only know how to like change a tire or like use a stud finder because I was taught how to do those things. So like I just don't understand this whole like it's nature. It's not nature. Maybe some aspect of it at the very beginning is nature, but not the whole thing. It's definitely not nature. Anyway. Yeah, I just want to say, like, whenever I hear butch femme, I think that it makes, for me personally, like as an individual, it makes a lot of sense to like see femininity, try it out, and feel a bit like your skin is crawling, to feel very like alienated, to feel very like uncomfortable. And so like my natural, whatever that means, my natural state is to like not do those things. And it's now gotten to the point where it's kind of like a lifestyle where it's like I just, when I go into the store, I don't walk to like the women's section where they have like the like blouses that are cut curvy, or like it's just my lifestyle doesn't include any femininity. So you would say, like, for me it's natural not to do those things. But what's inherent in the concept of butch femme is that there are women for which it is natural to be feminine. And what does femininity mean? A lot of these women who have had like a go at me about butch femme in the past, they get really fucking upset because they're like, oh, you don't know like what femininity is. And I'm like, okay, then explain it to me. Because from what I've read and what I've observed and what I've talked about and what I've experienced, femininity to me is ritualized helplessness, like this woman said. Because it's like, in a very, very literal sense, like Chinese foot binding, right? It was done intentionally so that women literally could not fucking walk. So they were helpless. And it was seen as the epitome of femininity. Women wearing corsets so you can't fucking breathe or run. Ritualized helplessness so that the man feels strong and powerful. Like, all of these things were done not just like in and of itself for the sake of itself, but as a counterpoint to the strong, powerful, active man to make you. And the actual problem is not actually like how do you look. Like, if I look at a woman and see her wearing heels, like, I don't really give a fuck. What I care about is like what it does to her mentality. For those of you who were around when we read Femininity by Susan Brown Miller, the last chapter, I think it's called Ambition. And I think the chapter before that's called Emotion. And it's basically about how when we're practicing femininity, like in terms of aesthetic and style, women, we teach ourselves to be like constantly modifying, constantly like self-observing, and constantly like conforming, because fashion changes, right? So like what you're conforming to when you're like 15 is not what you're conforming to when you're 75. Like fashion, these things change. And so what that does to you mentally is teaches you to constantly be like self-monitoring and self-modifying and like trying to fit into the mold for other people and like go along to get along and all this shit. And so it's not actually about like, are you wearing lipstick or not? It's about, are you the kind of person who puts yourself second for the sake of something else? Because that's the opposite of what men are supposed to do. Men are supposed to be like go-getters who don't take no for an answer, who like have ambitions and like work hard and sacrifice to like get to those ambitions and stuff, and not like, I'll do anything so people around me are happy. Because that's like on a very basic level, I think, what femininity enforces in behavior in terms of in women in terms of behavior. I don't know. And I'm sure somebody would counter this by being like, well, I know a butch-femme couple where like the femme is like a lawyer or something. And I'm like, okay, for sure. But I just mean like on a very basic like analysis level, these things don't happen in a vacuum. I have this other graph here, which is like a lot bigger. Hello. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Oh, for fuck's sake. What is going on? Some kind of update on my iPad. Okay. It's a lot bigger. I'm not going to read you the whole thing. But basically, it has like level of the gender system, because remember, gender is not just some random thing that happened by itself. It's meant to enforce male dominance and female subservience, right? And so the top level is just about like clothing and preferences and stuff. And it goes down and down and down and down until it's like the purpose of women is to have babies because that's like their natural potential. So it starts off by being like, do you wear lipstick or not? And ends off by being like, well, you have a brain, but you also have a womb. So like, should you be using your brain? Because it seems like you should be using your womb. Like that's like the way the system works. So you can't just be like, well, I'm okay with like the first 3 steps on the ladder, but the 7th step, like that's a bridge too far for me. Like they all work together as a dynamic, as a system. Anyway, maybe I'll refer to this a bit later, but let's keep reading the article. Yes, I'm gonna respond to a few of you guys. Woof woof. Wait, do I know you? Like in person? I think I recognized your picture. I'm similar to you in expression, and femme women treat me like a butch, and butch women treat me or belittle me for not being butch enough. Yeah, exactly. If you are who I think you are, I'm pretty sure we stood next to each other and people like confused. Like I think we are both at the same event and people were asking after you, like thinking that I was you because we look so similar. Waterbender says maybe because being lesbian is inherently gender nonconforming, possibly the most gender nonconforming thing that exists. So femme is the only outward femininity that makes it easier to move around in the world. I agree. This is something else about like the butch femme that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not sure if this was your intention, but it's making me think this. So a lot of butches are like, we have such a unique struggle that like we shouldn't be questioned. And again, it's giving like genderist bullshit where it's like there's like mask privilege or femme privilege or whatever. A lot of women, I actually have this experience myself. When I have a shaved Emily, oh my gosh, hi Emily. Hi. We met on Women's Land. Like in 2019 or something. Anyway, we do look the same, like especially when we're like not wearing shirts from the back. We're like the exact same. Sorry. Yes. But like, do you think that women who have to like doll themselves up to like, for example, go to court because they're lawyers and they want to be taken seriously in the professional world don't have like a struggle with that? Or don't have like their own struggle that's separate and unique from a butch's struggle when she doesn't try to conform to those things and make her way anyway? Like, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say, I've said this like point several times. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is that I don't like this like us versus them amongst women. All women have the same struggles. The way it impacts us might be different. The way we react to it might be different. The way we understand it might be different, but we all have the same struggles. And I don't like this us versus them mentality amongst women. And then they're like, oh, but the us versus them is like a positive because it creates like like a friction that's like positive for like romantic stuff and whatever. And I'm like, for sure, but like whatever makes you hot in bed or something is like great. But what does that have to do with feminism, like as a whole? I don't get it. Emily, is so great to see you. Okay, let's keep reading the article because I literally read like 3 paragraphs and then talked for like fucking 15 minutes. Let's keep going. All right. Yeah, my butch partner enjoyed wait, I was looking this way before. The fiction. Oh yeah. This last phrase, I'm going to read it again because it really gives me the subject-object thing. I felt as though I was being railroaded into playing a theatrical role in someone else's fiction, and that her fiction was her reason for living. So, yeah, just the idea that, like, I'm an actor and you're my like accessory. And like, just in this individual woman's experience, obviously it's not a very healthy relationship. You can't like communicate about these things, right? See, culture. I like the word culture. I think it's appropriate for this setting. But in that cultural setting, I also thought I was being appreciated and admired by butches for who I was, an intrinsically feminine woman. I saw my femininity as a part of how I was born. I did occasionally encounter a lesbian who pointed out the cartoon I was enacting, but I would always be dismissive. I believed that femme was my identity. Exactly. So, this is something else about butch-femme, like the very first point that I mentioned, like 5 minutes into the stream, where I was like, what is butch-femme? Is it descriptive or prescriptive? Because this whole like it's who you are on the inside or something. It's like something ineffable, something intangible, something you can't really pin down. And I'm like, you're talking about gender identity. This is some genderist shit. I don't like that. I don't care if the women who first started making these arguments didn't know about trans shit, didn't like whatever. From where I'm sitting right now in 2024, being detrans, looking at this shit, it looks like gender to me. I don't like that. Like, end of story. Some of the most bizarre consequences of butch-femme arose from the frequent requirement of the femme to bolster the butch's appearance of masculinity. Perhaps because many employers are less likely to hire unfeminine women than feminine women, lesbian or not, I typically had more income than my butch partners. If we went out with our friends in the butch-femme cult, I would give my partner cash before we left so that she could then use it to pick up the tab for her woman. Another thing, just one of my friends is reading Stone Butch Blues right now, and every day we call and she gives me a recap and then she gives me her opinions. And like when I was talking to someone on Twitter about this article today, just like everything in my mind was like blowing up, and I was like, let's talk about it. This is giving like a lot of the Stone Butch Blues vibes. We would always take my car when we went anywhere, as it was a better vehicle, and of course I would drive. But if we were going to a designated butch-femme event, my butch partner needed to drive, so she could pretend it was her car, so she could pose as the butch with the nice wheels. So this is what I mean when I'm like, it's all synthetic anyway. Like, if it's that, like, if it needs to be propped up with such, like, intention, then it's not natural. One woman I dated explicitly policed how I dressed. I remember getting up one morning and putting on a pair of green cargo pants I had purchased to paint the apartment, and kept because they were so comfortable, only to hear from the bed, "They don't look very femme." I replied, "If they're on me, they are." But it stayed in my mind that no one should tell me how to dress. My discomfort with butch femme was growing. This is one of the paragraphs that a friend sent me, and then she told me like a story about how her ex-girlfriend would like police how she dressed, like similarly. And this is like, when were they dating? 2016 or something, like recently in the grand scheme of things. Kitty cat. Wow, that's like 1950s gender stereotypes. Yeah. And so I think that a lot of proponents of butch-femme would say like, oh, well, that's this relationship. Like this relationship is toxic and unhealthy. But like, I wouldn't do that to and I'm like, good for you. Like, I'm glad you don't do that to your girlfriend or your wife or whatever. But like, what a lot of women call descriptive becomes prescriptive when it means so much to you. That's kind of what I said, what I was trying to say when I was like, I kind of outgrew needing the word butch, where it's like, I don't want to like go to the store, see a t-shirt that I want to buy and think like, oh, I can't buy it because I'm butch, so I can't wear pink or something. Like, if I was holding on to that word, it would have control over me. And I don't want, oh my gosh, Apostle Person, hello. Long time no see, sis. Someone else that I've met in person. Yeah, like, it becomes descriptive. Sorry, it becomes prescriptive rather than descriptive because gender is so powerful. And so what I was saying before is like, in this era of genderism, like transness, it's almost impossible as a young woman like myself, not that young, I'm almost 30, but like, you know, a woman of my age in this era, to hear about boxes and not try to stuff myself into boxes. I actually question if it's always been that way. That seems like human nature to me at this point. But that has a lot of power. And to dismiss it as its nature, don't ask questions, is to dismiss that the power that like the dominant patriarchal structure has over women when it comes to enforcing like subservient behavior through genderist expectations and roles. And like, I don't know. Friends are like trolling me, text me. They're like, "You're almost 30, you're not that long, lol," because my friend just turned 30. Okay. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Michelle, hello. Honestly, guys, I didn't really expect anybody to show up to this because I didn't like schedule it ahead of time. I literally was like driving home from like the store on the phone with my friend, and I was like, I should do a live stream, and then I sat down to do it, and 20 of you are here. It's like very heartwarming that all of you are still waiting for me to pop up in your notifications. Okay, let's keep going. All right. I'm pretty good, Michelle. Right, explicitly dressing. Okay. At a house party one night, I met a woman who was fluent in French. We spoke for a long time as she told me about her travels in Europe and India, getting her doctorate. We sat in a corner of the living room, chatting mostly in French. It was a treat for me. Later, after my butch partner and I had waved goodnight to guests from the front porch, my partner walked past me into the house, deliberately shoving me with her shoulder hard enough to knock me into the doorframe, while accusing me of being disrespectful to her by flirting. I hadn't been flirting, but I hadn't remained in attendance at my partner's side either. All the small slights began to accumulate. The ritualized deference I was expected to give to the butch began to increase my feelings of dissonance and of resentment. I continued to feel as if I was diminishing or hiding my own light in order to prop up a melodrama whose benefits increasingly eluded me. I struggled to understand how it was in the interest of any participating lesbians. It's not as though sexuality in the butch-femme cult was unaffected by the public charade. It was. Although supporters of butch-femme, like supporters of sadomasochism, often characterize sub-sex as far sexier than what they sometimes call vanilla sex, my experience was different. For me, sex is hot when it's authentic, intimate interaction in which both participants react to and respond to each other. With some butches, it was like that. The butch facade was mostly or entirely discarded at the bedroom door, but other butches refused to permit me to touch them or to engage in any way beyond lying still and allowing access. I wasn't even sure it mattered whether or not it was to satisfy me or whether or not I pretended that it was. Yeah, I agree that this relationship seems like straight up abusive. And I'm not trying to say that like all butch femme relationships are like this, obviously, but uh to me it's quite illustrative that she is like, see like the gender expectations, see the abuse, see how they like fit together, and to say that there's nothing worth talking about to me is like incomprehensible. Yeah. This makes me think of, I bet you I have it. Okay, I have every single issue of Common Lives, Lesbian Lives, which was like not a feminist, a lesbian periodical from the 60s to the 90s or something. I can't remember. I have them. I can go look at them. I have every single issue now. My intention is to create an audiobook reading of every single entry. I wouldn't call them essays because a lot of them are more like journal posts, but they're just like, I'm a lesbian from like Kansas, and when I go out to like the bar, this is what happens. Or like, I'm a lesbian from like Alaska, and like, this is what happens on my farm or whatever. Like, it's common lives, lesbian lives. Like, this is like the lives of lesbians. They're great. There's one entry that me and my friend read and talked about where like butch-femme was like such a sexual role where it was like if you're a femme, you're like I'm gonna use like kind of like contemporary gay language. If you're a femme, you're like a bottom, and if you're a butch, you're like a stone top. And as soon as you let a femme like touch you in your like their region, they call it like flipping a butch, and now that butch is a femme. And I read this with my friend, and we were like, "What the fuck is this?" Because it's like again, this is not descriptive; it's prescriptive. Like as if in this, I think it was describing like I think the description started in the mid 50s. I don't know if she's still watching. Text me if you think I'm right. But like I think the description of this woman's like butch femme life started in the 50s. But she basically was like, as soon as you went to like the club with the lesbians, and like a femme said like that butch let her touch her, then we all would be like, oh, like she's a femme now. So like whoever hooks up with her has to like be the butch, and she can't be a butch anymore. And it was like a one-way thing, and it was like so fucking bizarre. Like it was truly like really absurd and interesting and fascinating to read. Where it was like if a femme sleeps with another femme, it's not cheating because like they're both femmes and neither of them is like the active dominant partner, so like it doesn't count or something. I don't know, it was really fucking weird. But the whole thing to me was the whole like flip that butch thing, where it was like as soon as you let yourself be like vulnerable or pleased or like wanting something in bed, you suddenly are like complete and absolute like feminine woman and there is no going back. um and it kind of evokes like the like virginity purity kind of thing where it's like as soon as you like lose your purity, you lose your power. um which is in a lot of ways like some choice feminist weirdness to me. I don't know. um yeah, anyway, okay, so just once I read through all of the like common lives, lesbian lives, like each issue has it's like a little book with like stories in it. And I'm not sure how many. I think I have like 60 of them or something. I archived them all last spring. But my plan is to read like one a week for like a while and get them all out there because they're really hard to find. They have like an archive of them at like I think the University of Iowa because they were originally published in Kansas, I'm pretty sure. Um, but it's like an in-person archive. You have to like go in person to access it. And most university archives now you can't access them unless you're a student at that university. So I just want to make them accessible, because I want women to see that like the struggles that you're having right now and like the loneliness or like not fitting into the culture or whatever, lesbians have always had that experience, whether it's like in the 60s or the 80s or the 90s or now. It's like common. This is normal. You're not some freak. We've all like been there or whatever. Anyway, it is so awesome that I have the whole archive. I met a woman in Michigan, uh, and I like she's like she's been a librarian. She's like a lesbian feminist, and I messaged her and I was like, I want these books. How do I get them? And she was like, oh, I have them. I'll just give them to you. And she mailed them to me. It was like so crazy. Um, oh yeah, she lives. Emily's so lucky. She lives at a woman's land. One day I'm gonna come out to the south and visit you guys, and also visit the. Well, I don't want to name names, but you and I both have a mutual friend who also lives on a woman's land. Anyway, okay. I'm sure we actually have multiple mutual friends who live on women's land. Let's keep going. All right. Sometime later, a partner, not the shoving partner, and I attended a dance specifically designated as butch femme. The crowded hall was filled with women, about half of them dressed as masculine studs and the other half as feminine divas, and all of us were judging one another based on how successfully we had fulfilled the stereotypes. I felt I no longer belonged there. The event struck me as a sad charade. It had required so much effort and expense, not in order to elevate women loving women in all their variety and authenticity and joy, but to parade once again the tired gender stereotypes of the 1950s. Why were lesbians reenacting the most oppressive time for all women in anyone's living memory? Why were lesbians, who are of course all women, creating and eroticizing dominance, butch, and submission, femme? Why didn't we believe in the equality of men and women? Didn't we believe in equality among lesbians? Oh, wait, sorry. Didn't we believe in equality amongst men and women? Didn't we believe in equality amongst lesbians? What kind of community were we building by polarizing lesbians and demanding that everyone conform to the dom sub model? The butches were failing in their displays of perfect masculinity, and everyone knew it, and everyone covered for them, and everyone failed at covering their failure. The femmes were failing at being submissive and failing at hiding their failure. Everyone was lying and failing in order to prop up an old order that always harmed women, and that doesn't in any way support liberation or equality or community for lesbians. I think it's interesting to draw a dom sub thing here, because I remember some discourse on Twitter maybe like a year ago, where some straight guy was having a go at some gay dudes and basically implying that if they're into top bottom, that they're like doing BDSM. And I was like, that's giving a lot of power to like what penetration is in sex. Like, I don't know. That was like my thought at the time. I do think that both dom sub and butch femme are like iterations of like the object, the subject, like the actor, the actee, like the active, the passive. They're both different iterations of this. Do I think that means they're like inherently connected? No. But like I said with this whole like flip that butch thing, it clearly was like if you're active, you have power, and if you're passive, you're like vulnerable. And that we need to pretend that all the active women have no vulnerability, and that all the vulnerable women are only vulnerable. And as this woman said, she is like, I was a primary breadwinner and I actually had more financial power, but we had to pretend it wasn't that way. Like, it's just the whole thing comes off as very, very inauthentic. And I guess in this context, to me, the most relevant connection between dom sub and butch femme is that they're both like very, very synthetic. But correlation, but not causation. Yeah, I think there can be elements, but it'd vary a lot between relationships, not inherent to the roles. Yeah, very much agree. But you also get like the whole like I came out of like a misogynist 1950s culture to become a radical feminist from reading this blog. It's very interesting. I wonder how old this woman is. It sounds like this story starts in the 60s to me. I don't know for any of you. Brenda says, what if it's patriarchy that dictates top bottom as dominant submissive? Maybe it's egalitarian, matriarchal, a cooperative effort amongst lesbians. I mean, yeah, I know. So Brenda says women's nature is cooperative. I agree. Well, somebody said, where was it? Somebody said like butch in the streets, femme in the sheets. Yeah. My friend is reading Stone Butch Blues right now, and so she keeps sending me like little like screen caps and then like telling me like the story so far and then telling me her thoughts about the story so far. And she's probably gonna finish it today. And so tonight she'll give me like the final recap. And in the book, one of the characters breaks up with her girlfriend because she's like, I got really fucking sick of this whole like Stone Butch thing. And to me, I'm like, what does that mean? Obviously, I'm not the one reading the book, but I was like, is this you got tired of your partner acting invulnerable, like emotionally? You got, or like in a very literal sense, like in terms of sex, you're like, I want to do stuff that we can't do. I'm not sure what exactly it meant, but I'm not trying to say I think anybody should do anything specifically in bed. Obviously, like you should only do what you want to do in bed, but like it's just very, I think, unhealthy to like act in these prescribed roles to the nth degree and like have to put more and more energy into it. I don't know. Yeah, I've never read Stone Butch Blues before. I'm happy enough to hear my friends multiple different retellings of it, that their takeaways or whatever. It all just seems a reiteration of masculinity, femininity. Yes, but proponents of butch femme don't see that as a negative thing. But I'm like, if you understand that femininity is about like belittling your humanity to the point of like only being an accessory to those who are masculine, to men, and then just replacing that with like a woman, that how is that good for the feminine woman? Like it's not. And to just say like, well, she enjoys it. I'm like, I don't fucking care if she enjoys it. Like, is she living like a fulfilling life? You know, where she's like self-actualizing and like has the independence that she needs to be like confident and happy? Or like when she puts on all of her makeup, she feels a little bit alienated, but at least her girlfriend says she looks hot. Like, I'm not in everybody's relationship. It's not like my place to tell you what you should and shouldn't do, but like these are my opinions and it's my YouTube channel. So okay. Uh okay. Oh wait, I went too far, sorry. I like how she uses like to support liberation or equality or community for lesbians. It's kind of what I was mentioning like I guess like 20 minutes ago, where I was like, I don't, one of the things I fundamentally don't like about butch-femme is this us versus them mentality within the women's group. I'm not trying to say that there are no differences among women. Of course there are differences. But just it's like this synthetic duality that has no real basis. I don't like that. Um Further, butch femme enhances the competition among women that all women are raised to participate in. Only here we compete for most masculine and most feminine. By the way, if you win the competition by being the most masculine butch possible, then trans becomes the winning card, except that you still lose to any man. But it's a win for patriarchy in that, insofar as lesbians are visible, lesbians model the inevitability of male domination and the futility of trying to escape it in the lesbian community. Okay, so as someone who's been considered butch a lot of the time, as someone who has friends who are definitely fucking like butch, whatever that word means, um, I don't think that butch women are like getting up in the morning and being like, how can I do the patriarchy today? I don't think that's what's going on. Um, I think asking these questions can be really, really hard for women who genuinely are like, I just naturally don't want to do what the femininity is and just want to like wear comfortable clothes and like enjoy working with my hands. And like, that's how I am. And I'm not trying to say you shouldn't be that way. Do whatever the fuck you want. But if that's what you're doing, is that what this woman is describing? I don't think so. That's why I started off by the stream kind of by saying I think we're actually all on the same side and that there's a lot of like knee-jerk reactions that are like, oh no, like everything's perfect with butches. And it's like, okay, maybe you are like a healthy, self-actualized butch, and the woman that she's describing isn't. But saying that you're all the same and therefore none of you should be questioned means that this kind of behavior is not questioned. Um, and particularly here where she says the end point is transness. I'm very, very, very on the same page as the women who are proponents of butch-femme in this particular case, because the women in the last couple years that I see who are really, really strong about butch-femme are doing it for one main reason, and that's because they want to hold on so tightly to whatever vestiges of lesbian culture remain. And to them, this is like the last bit of lesbian culture that still exists. Because they're trying to use it as a kind of alternative to trans culture. And so I do think it's very important that when women are young, regardless of their sexual orientation, they see that there's different ways to be a woman, right? You have like the sporty dyke, and you have like the hiking dyke, and you have like the what a hippie dyke, and like the butch, and all these things. You can like look at the women and say, oh, there's all different ways to be a woman that don't necessitate femininity and subservience. It's very, very important. Is that gonna like stop women from unnecessarily transitioning? I don't think so. I think it can give them hope, give them an alternative. But if they really think that they're so uncomfortable that they need some kind of huge radical change to be comfortable in their body, I don't think seeing that's going to stop them. But anyway, I understand why these women feel so strongly about it. And I'm on the same side as you. If women think that there is like a role that already exists that they can step into to find like emotional comfort rather than medicalizing, I'm so here for that. Unfortunately, amongst my generation, like women under the age of 30, I guess, or like 35 or whatever, so many of the women I've talked to under the age of 35, when we talk about like what does trans, how has it impacted us, like what is like lesbian culture, how has it impacted us, one of the number one things I hear is that they're alienated by the rigidity of gender roles within lesbian culture. And I don't think that that's like lesbians' fault. I actually think it's more like a reaction to like LGBTQIA stuff. But basically, a lot of women are like, well, if I'm not butch and I'm not femme, and I'm not like the quintessential sporty dyke who is like a bodybuilder, then I must be like non-binary. Like, if I don't fit into one of like the categories I've heard of, then I must not be a lesbian. And so I understand why the women who are like butch is like a strong word with a strong history, and we're still here and you can still find us. Like, I understand what you're doing and I respect what you're doing, but it's not going to solve all the problems. And I think that if you're very black and white about it, it actually might make more problems. One friend of mine, I think she went to high school with this woman who like now they have like very sporadic contact, but this woman keeps cycling on and off testosterone because she's like it's so unhealthy where she's like I'm not masculine enough to be a butch, but I'm definitely not feminine. So like if I take testosterone, I'll like be like a man. I can like become a thing that is like a known category. Um and then she'll have kind of like, like a mental breakdown about something and be like, it's okay, like I've stopped testosterone, now I can like be like the femme that I'm supposed to be or something. And she keeps like vacillating. And it's like clearly, well, this woman obviously has like a lot of mental health issues, but clearly just being like, well, there's like multiple categories and just like pick one and fit into it is not like the solution to a trans culture where we're being told there's multiple categories, pick one, you can fit into it, and then medicalize into that. Clearly being like, here's like the medicalized categories that are like trans, here's like the non-medicalized categories that are lesbians, like pick one is not like the solution, I don't think. I was talking about this exact topic with a friend of mine earlier today before I started the stream, and she quoted a woman that she had spoken to a few months ago, and the woman said, you know which group of women I hate the most? It's the soft butches. They look kind of butch, but they don't know how to do any like manual labor. Like, what's even the point of you? I'm pretty sure that's like word for word what she said. And my number one thought was like, well, the point of women is not to fulfill a role and is not to serve a specific person. The point of a woman is to like just exist and like live her life. Give me a name and guess she did. What do you name? What name do you want? She's texting me now. But yeah, like, what's the point of a soft butch if she can't do any like manual labor? And I'm like, the point of lesbians is not to fit into some fucking box so they can like Lego together with the other lesbians. I would say the vast majority of lesbians that I know are some kind of like in betweener, where they're more like the sporty dyke or like the hiking dyke or like the whatever. And the women I know who actually like fucking pass as men and are detrans, the majority of them don't really call themselves butch, or if they do, it's more like I know I fit into the butch category, but like I don't hold on to that identity really strongly because they've grown out of like needing identities, I guess. Okay, I'll just tell you like more explicitly. So my friend who was talking to this other woman who said like what's the point of a soft butch? This was somebody that she had like had sex with. And the woman that she was talking to called her a femme because she basically was like, if I'm the butch and we had sex, then you must be the femme. And my friend is like, not a femme. And she was like, what does that mean? And she said, the butch woman in question said, I'm strong and capable. And she was saying that you're not strong and capable. And listening to my friend recount this conversation to me about this woman that she had hooked up with, I was like, is this because like you're an introvert? You're like naturally feminine or something? Because like she's definitely not in any objective way. Like a list of like feminine characteristics, like she wouldn't check almost any of them off. Not that like it matters if she does or doesn't, but it's just it shows like how stupid and pointless it is. That basically she's like, if you're not an extrovert who like interrupts people and like dominates conversations, that's all you need to like be feminine. And like if you stand next to a butch who's wearing work boots and you're not wearing work boots, you must be a femme. Like it's all so meaningless. And as she says, incredibly insulting. My friend goes on to say, like, in the context of sex, she basically was like, I'm dominant and you're not. And I was like, but sex is something we share. I thought we were equal, and it hurt my feelings. Yeah. But this is what I mean when I'm like, these women who are like, it's just nature. We don't need to talk about it. It's hurting you and the women around you to take these things as inherent truth and not talk about it. I'm not trying to be like some asshole raining on your parade. I mean it like in a very literal way. Like in a very like, you know, this friend in particular, it's not the end of the world. This woman insulted her. But if these things like are happening constantly throughout the lesbian community, my friend just be like, what the fuck, you asshole? If these things are happening constantly throughout the lesbian community, is it leading us to be connected and cooperative and supportive of each other? Or to have like these unnecessary little divisions amongst each other? Like, Kevin, are you a guy? Kevin, your comment is giving I'm a man. Puzzle person says, I love working outside and building things, etc. But if I got shoved into a category like that where I had to check all the masculine boxes, that would probably drive me crazy. Yep. Okay, well, Kevin, you've been deleted because men are not allowed in my live chat. What time is it? Oh, great, it's only 3. I have something to do at 6. Okay. We're going back up a little bit in the live chat. Kitty Cat says, trad wives pretend they enjoy that. Just to, I call BS. Oh, that's shit too, yeah. Blood Moon says, I'm a bit behind of the stream, but the femme not counting as cheating thing is like when men say if their girlfriends cheat with another woman, it doesn't count as cheating. Yeah. So this is again where I've been talking a lot about like subject object or like active passive, but another way to think about it is like person non-person. So it's like if I'm an owner of a sex toy and the sex toy like is in a drawer with the other sex toys, like I don't care because that's not a real person actively doing something. Like that's how little respect you need to have for like that individual having a personhood and like a like, you know, autonomy and like the ability to make decisions and the ability to enact on their own decisions and like garner meaning from like the experiences they have based on their own decisions. That's how little respect you need to have for them for it to like basically not compute as like relevant to you. Speaking of femme though, I've talked to an old butch who Emily's probably met her. Anybody else in the live chat met her? Probably not. My friend who's texting me has met her. I've talked to an old butch who I would describe her as an old butch. I don't know if she would describe herself that way. But she had a relationship with another, I think she called herself and her partner androgynous in like the 70s and the 80s. And she talked about basically being completely ostracized by the lesbian community because they didn't fit like as working class lesbians, like the butch-femme dynamic. And this is another thing where when you talk about butch-femme, they're like, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater and like casting all butches as like these evil bad guys. No, I'm not. I'm asking questions. And I think it's to the benefit of everyone involved, including butch women. Because, like, I used to know a woman who only dated feminine women because she thought that's all I'm allowed to do. That's all that makes sense for me because I'm butch. And then she eventually dated another butch woman. And honestly, that relationship was, like, not the best. But she had to go through, like, some kind of, like, mental epiphany situation to, like, realize it's okay for her to date another butch woman. And this was, like, in the year 2017 or something. This is not ancient history. And I'm like, it's creating all these like synthetic us versus thems amongst lesbians, and how does that serve lesbians? Even if that relationship was not long lasting, they clearly like had something positive together and experienced those positive things together. And if this us versus them butch femme stupidness was never interrogated, maybe they wouldn't have had that chance to be together. And like obviously to me it's obvious that like in back in the day when butch or femme was not seen as acceptable amongst lesbian culture, it's because they realized that like butch femme was so synthetic. And so if two butch women walked in holding hands or two femme women walked in holding hands, it would show everyone, it'd be like tangible proof that it's not, doesn't have to be that way. And it's like propped up through like effort. As the woman is saying in this article, you know, we had to work to cover up the failures and we weren't very good at that. Let's keep going. Kitty Cat says, I think a lot of butch women are just not marked by femininity. It's not adhering to patriarchal masculinity. Yes, I agree with that too. Very, very much. I got into an argument a few months ago on Twitter where somebody was like, I'm proud to be a masculine woman or something. And I was like, I get what you're saying, and I think that's great that you're proud of it, but I have like a language issue where I don't like when women call themselves masculine, because to me, as a radical feminist with like this analysis of gender, masculine has like a lot of negative connotations, right? Where it necessitates subservience, necessitates dominance, all these things. Like it's not just, you know, I wore jeans instead of a skirt. Like that, when I hear the term masculine, that's not what I think. And so they basically were like, well, we mean masculine in terms of like an aesthetic and not in terms of like an attitude and a dynamic. And I was like, I get what you mean. And I'm not questioning that what you're saying is true, but it's impossible to do that in a gendered world without it having like an impact. I'm not trying to say that I have like a solution to this, or I'm not trying to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do, but just I get what you mean, that they're not adhering to patriarchal masculinity. Yeah. Michelle says lesbian has such negative connotations right now that I think any excuse not to be a woman is often glommed onto. Yeah. Nick says, I know a lesbian who transitioned after being told repeatedly by her peers that she wasn't a real lesbian because she wasn't Gold Star. That's so fucking disturbing. Brenda says, any activity that a woman is doing is a woman's activity. I very much agree with that. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't question it. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going with the article. So, butch-femme separates lesbians from bonding with each other as a community of equals, and also separates lesbians from straight women who seek equality. But it reassures the sometimes hostile or mocking public at large that at least lesbian couples have one partner who operates as the man, and femmes appear at least slightly under the control of the household level. Isn't patriarchy brilliant? The final chapter in my flight from gender occurred in a moment etched in my memory 20 years ago. I was driving to work. It was a summer morning. The sun was bright and the air was cool and fresh. I was dressed up in my femme presentation, but had the car windows open since I was driving slowly enough on the city streets that the breeze wouldn't mess with my hair. As the traffic slowed and then stopped at a light, I looked to my left and saw a young man lightly stepping out of his row house in a white t shirt, jeans, and flip flops. As the light turned green and my line of traffic began to move, I caught my last glimpse of him walking easily down the steps of the brownstone, and all I could think was, I want that. I want to walk out into the world in a white t shirt, jeans, and flip flops. I was consumed with envy. Oh, this reminds me. Um, I was talking to a woman from a third world country, like an immigrant to Canada, and who was a lesbian. And she was telling me that, like, back home, all the straight girls would never even step out of the house to buy a loaf of bread unless they were 100% dolled up. Like 100%. She's like, they might spend an hour doing their makeup just to go buy like a jug of milk. Because every single time you are viewed in public, this is like an opportunity to like potentially attract like a husband with money. And like it's like a very poor country. So she was like, women can never just exist like in and of themselves doing their own things for themselves. They're always existing like 100% in terms of like, what can I do to attract a mate? And I've heard this also from another woman I know from Mexico who moved to Canada, who was like, in Mexico, like the machismo culture, it's like everywhere. It's like so ubiquitous that when I got to Canada, it was like it took me years to like not be freaked out about the idea of leaving the house without makeup. Um and so this is what I mean when I'm like, even if you, the butch, are not like telling your girlfriend like you have to put on makeup, I'm like, what impact is the femininity having on her? Like this woman, it wasn't until she saw a man just existing that she was like, wouldn't it be nice to just exist without having to do like all this extra work? And like if she had that epiphany while she was in a relationship with a butch woman, what would happen in their relationship? Because butch femme, it's like it's not a malleable relationship dynamic, right? It's static and prescriptive, where it you have to like put in the work to maintain it. Like gender roles, they have to be like intentionally maintained because they're not natural. Um, yeah, let's keep going. Today I have a drawer full of white t-shirts, jeans, and sandals. Flip-flops don't work for me, and that's okay. Today I'm simply a lesbian who strives to have no gender identity. A lesbian with short, easy hair that's naturally turning gray, without makeup, with various body parts exactly as hairy as nature intended, and with a confidence that comes from not having to be differential to a partner or to lie to her or to be controlled by a community ready to reel me in for transgressing the old sex stereotypes. I tried to build a local in person lesbian community made up of equals and based on cooperation and love, rather than competition for conformity and dominance. I tried to make us visible as lesbians in all of our diversity. I tried to avoid participating in my own oppression or the oppression of my sisters, and I expect that if lesbian communities consistently treat each other as loving sisters, we will naturally attract more women to our ranks. But you see how what she's saying doesn't necessarily preclude like the potential for butch role models? Like, why does there need to be a word that's like descriptive and or prescriptive for it? For you to look at a young woman and say, "Oh, you don't like doing these things? That's okay, because there's women who don't do these things." Like, I actually think putting all kinds of like labels and lifestyles and cultures in the mix makes things like extra complicated. Um, Like, I remember when I first started re-identifying as a woman, or as a female, actually, first, then a woman is later, I was like, I wasn't thinking about like specific groups of women and specific women. I was just like, there are women universally around the world who have like X experience. And I have that X experience, and it's enough that we have that to for us to be in the same category. Like, I wasn't going out of my way to like pick and choose individual stuff. Um, although I do know that there are some women who, like, when they re-identify as women, they're like explicitly like, it's okay for me to be a woman because I see women like me who call themselves women, so that makes it okay for me. But I'm just like, I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, I don't like putting so much importance on the term on identity rather than on experience. And as soon as we start creating categories and words for these things, it becomes more about identity than experience. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that sentence. I think that's good. Um, a possible person, obligatory, not butch because she's bisexual. Um, but I frequently question how much masculine norms influence and maybe contaminate me and other GNC women generally versus pressure to be feminine going the other way. I don't know how to put it exactly. Yeah. Um, I think the thing like this that I've mentioned the most on my YouTube channel is like how to stay humble enough to question myself without falling into like female socialization, how to be assertive and forthright without coming off as domineering. Where is like the middle ground there, right? And I think I get what you're saying, where it's like when I'm doing things, am I falling into programming or am I doing what I just want to do regardless of the programming? It's hard to figure that out. And I think it's a comfort to just be like, I'm doing what I want to do. Oh, it falls into programming. Isn't that convenient, right? When it comes to like the butch-femme concept. Right, so Kitty Cat, what she's saying comes to, I think, fundamentally why a lot of lesbians are like, regardless of the butch-femme discussion, we need to like not pretend that it's straight. So Kitty Cat is saying, at this, you might as well be in a straight relationship because you're reenacting the dynamics of a straight relationship. Yeah, so I would disagree with that because at the end of the day, they are both women. Role playing, but women. And how self-aware are they that they're role playing, right? I'm sure a lot of women would be very offended by this stream. But at the end of the day, I do think that they're lesbians, which is why I'm like holding them to a higher standard than if a man and a woman, like the trad wife stuff. I hope for more for the woman. I don't expect anything better from the man in those situations. In this case, I expect a lot more from both of you. At the very least, to be able to fucking explain to me why there is no harm being done. There is two women I know. A lot of women that I know, if they call themselves butch or femme, I'm like, explain it to me. Like, you're my friend. Tell me what it means when you call yourself butch. When you look at other women in the world, what characteristics or behavior do you see that makes you think that is a butch, that is a femme? Um, and like explain it to me. And I have two friends who call themselves femmes, and I've asked them, like, what does it mean when you call yourself a femme? Like, what is it that you do or don't do that makes you a femme? And these two women in particular are like, I like wearing dresses and doing femininity, and I recognize, like, as a feminist, like XYZ, whatever about femininity. But at the end of the day, like, I do like doing it. And so when I step out into the world, I'm treated as any other straight woman, and I look like any other, like, feminine woman. And, like, to me, that's what feminine is. And I was like, okay, so it's a very, like, practical term for you because it's very tangible what that means. It's not some ephemeral thing of, like, I topped you in bed, therefore you must be this other thing. It's, like, very, very, like, literal. And, like, okay, at least in that case, I can understand what you're talking about. And it comes from a place of self-awareness. Like, I'm aware that I like doing this list of characteristics that are femininity, and that this is like how I get treated by people. This is how it impacts our relationships. This is how like it impacts me versus if you were to do it, like, you know. Um Anyway, hey, silent voice. Yeah, so it's been an hour and a half. Kind of need to pee. Anybody have anything they want to mention for the last couple minutes of the stream? Oh, going back to my friend who hooked up with this woman who was like, "What's the point of a soft butch?" She texted me some more about it at the time that I didn't read it, so I'm gonna read it now. She went on to say, the butch woman that she hooked up with went on to say she felt sad because people don't see how feminine she actually is. When she looks so butch, it's actually very soft. And I was like, maybe you're just like a normal, complex human being. Yeah. Um, on some level, butch femme is like slightly dehumanizing because it forces you to be a little bit two dimensional. Um, like that's one of the takeaways that I've gotten so far from listening to my friend recounting Stone Butch Blues to me is that like you're not supposed to be vulnerable if you're butch, and you're not supposed to be tough if you're femme. And it's like, you'll hear these like butch femme women being like, "No, like my femme is like the toughest woman I've ever met," or whatever. And I'm like, of course she is because all women are fucking tough. And then butch women being like, I'm seen as like some tough badass, but actually, like what makes me a woman, like any other woman, is the fact that like I know how to be like vulnerable and supportive and blah blah blah. And I'm like, of course, because you're like a human being, you have like multitudes or whatever. Um, it just brings me back to this whole thing of like it's very synthetic. Um, hey, Sophia. Mm, yeah, possible person. I get that. Okay. Well, no one else has anything super exciting to say. I'm trying to remember when I was drinking the last time I did a live stream. I have made the switch from Diet Coke to flavored waters. We have this place in Canada, or at least in Ontario, called Farm Boy, and it's kind of like, what do you guys call that place? It's kind of like Trader Joe's. It's not really like Whole Foods because Whole Foods is super expensive. Anyway, they have like Farm Boy branded, basically LaCroix or La Croix or whatever it's called. And that's like my new thing is to drink all these flavored waters and stop drinking fucking caffeine. Um, Kitty Cat says, "You're not a role that you play, you're a complex, multidimensional human being existing." I like that. Thank you. Izzy says, "I always assumed that Butch Femme started as a survival tactic." Yeah, it did. Um, which is why I've kind of not made a lot of commentary about like historically, like before, like feminist analysis of it in the 60s and 70s. Um, so yeah, there are some, there are like two books, like the Butch Femme Reader and I forgot what it's called, but it's something like the jeans and the skirt or something. I don't remember. There's like these two books that are kind of like the foundational texts about like butch femme that are like the oldest. I don't have copies of either of them. I think one of them is a digital copy that I have access to. But I do eventually want to read them because they're very much like in the 1940s. This is like what we fucking did as like butch femmes. And I obviously would love to know about that. Uh but I'm not that up on it right now. Um remember when we led yeah, Paula, yeah. Remember when we read the Sophistries book? Well, I don't know how many of you guys were around when we read Sophistries because that was like 3 years ago. But a lot of the like very early recorded history that we have about lesbians is like in the medieval times or with Renaissance or whatever, when women were like put on trial for like impersonating men. And it's very obvious they did that so they could like own property and like, settle down with like their partner without it being like she's gonna get married off or something. Um, so obviously started off a lot more like practical survivalist. Izzy is very on point here. Um, oh yeah, Izzy. Yeah, if I am about to end the stream, you can post it in a comment if you want, but also, okay, like let's say this, post it in a comment. Also, if you have a link to the essay, even if it's like a Google Doc that I can't like edit, I can just open it, send it to me on the email. Maybe I'll do a follow-up stream on this about your essay. Oh hey Sabrina. Uh yeah, like I said earlier in the stream, I'm not like determined to maintain this position on butch-femme. I just haven't really seen uh any of this butch-femme stuff that seemed like very, very positive. It always has a lot of things that make me go like, how is this healthy? How is this good? How is this like authentic? Um yeah. Yeah, Sophistries was a really fucking terrible book. Okay, let me finish up the stream by telling you. Here is like the reading order starting in January when I move to my new place and live by myself. We're going to read Our Blood by Andrea Dworkin. Because, for one, those are the only things that people actually come to my channel to watch. Like, if you look at like my numbers of videos, the only thing people actually watch is my Dworkin videos. So I feel compelled to make at least one Dworkin reading a year. So we're going to do Our Blood. I feel like it's pretty inaccessible, and I have a copy now. So let's do that. Then I want to do like once a week, one entry from Common Lives, Lesbian Lives. Like I said, I think I have like 60 of them, and each issue has like whatever, like 10 or 20 stories in it. So it's going to take a really long time to get through Common Lives, Lesbian Lives. But I was thinking if I make it like every Sunday afternoon, I read like one of them. Whatever, we'll get through it eventually. And that's more like human interest / like lesbian history than it is like, like literature. After we're done Our Blood, I'm going to start. I have 2 books that are about lesbian history in Canada specifically. And despite the fact that I'm Canadian, I have never read a Canadian book on this fucking channel. So, my friend got them for me for my birthday last April. And I'm hoping that by next April, I will have actually started reading them on the channel. Oh, it's just a note section on your phone. Yeah, put it in the comments. Yeah, like every time I'm reading a book, guys, I've literally created thumbnails for like 4 different books. Like one of them is called like Feminist Epistemologies. One of them is Woman/Woman by Adele Martin and Phyllis Lyons. Like I've created multiple like thumbnails in like Canva to be like, we're gonna do this book next, and then like I get distracted. So I'm also thinking I got some books about like sex trafficking and prostitution that I think are very good. However, I'm not really sure about like YouTube because it's like a public place. But I do feel very strongly that it's a topic I haven't discussed a lot, I haven't learned about a lot until I went to this conference. I got like the human element. I think I have a much better understanding, like the connection between like, men having money, women being exploited, and like government policy, like how those things all work together to like hurt women and stuff. But I want to read some books. So there's one book about it that's Canadian that I want to ask the author if I could like read it on my YouTube channel to make like a kind of amateur audiobook and see what she says. I'm not sure how explicit it is, but yeah, anyway. Yeah, so I always have like ambitions to do more reading, but like I said, in January I will only have one job. So I really hope to do streaming at least 2 days a week, minimum 2 days a week, hopefully more like 3 or 4 days a week. As you know, it's all about moderation. So if I like schedule to do like 90 minutes of reading like 2 days a week, I will actually do it. So yeah. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys go. Waiting to get like dogpiled in some way for obviously hating all the lesbians. I can't get over one of the most common responses I saw to this article was that like if you agree with this, you're not a real lesbian. And I was like, literally, what are you talking about? Because the only qualifier to be a lesbian is to be a homosexual, and it actually has nothing to do with your opinions or your politics to be a homosexual. I just found it's all very knee-jerk. And I'm like, let's talk about it. Like, I don't know. Committing the evil of expressing an opinion. Yeah, I mean, that's me, you know. Uh, the sex tourism industry. Yeah. Yeah. I have a couple now. There's also a lot of women right now who, like, in the last 20 years, because you know how it is with like sexual abuse happens when you're a child. Like a lot of women who were like sex trafficked as minors, it's like after 2020 that they started like writing and publishing their own books. I'm sure that was happening before, but it seems like there's a lot of them right now. Um, I don't have a lot of them. I have a few of them, but also I'm like these authors are alive. I don't want to read their books. Like I would have to ask permission. You know what I mean? But if you are interested in that stuff, it's pretty easy to find it. I should do like a live stream that's basically like who was at the Congress, what did I learn from them, and then like the links. Even if I can't remember every detail about what happened there, because that way you could be like a source for you guys to like look for stuff. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna end up the stream. It's very great to see all of you old guys that I'm used to. Thank you to everyone new who popped in. I haven't really been checking my email, so you know my email, gnccentric@gmail.com. If you want to email me something to cover on the channel in the like near future, I'm now like gonna start checking my email now that I'm like streaming again. All right. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.